Good day, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. We're glad to have you. We will start our session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Again, 2 minutes after the top of the hour. We're glad to have you. Good morning, good day, good afternoon. From where you're calling in from around the world, we're glad to have you. Welcome back. We'll start up the session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So you still have time to get coffee or what have you. Again, 2 minutes after the top of the hour. We're glad to have you. Again, welcome everyone. Good evening to some of you, depending on where you're calling in from. Good morning and good afternoon. We'll start our session in about another 2 minutes. We want to allow others to join us. So again, we'll start with 2 minutes after the hour. So we're at the top of the hour now. I see some of you have put in the chat where you're calling in from. Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, in about another minute and a half, we'll get started. Again, good morning and welcome. Good afternoon and good evening to some of you, depending on where you're calling in from around the world. I see we have some Seattle here, Michigan. Thank you for sharing your locations in the chat. Appreciate that. Going to get started in another 30 seconds here or so. Well, let's go ahead and get started. 9:02 clicked in. All right, let's get started. Welcome again. My name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic. We're glad you're here to join us for our Search Mastery certification session. A little bit about my background. I've been in IT for 30 plus years now. I've played various roles: DBA, technical trainer, database designer, case tool administrator. So basically around data is where my career stems from. I enjoy training. So again, for the last 15 so years, I've been in the training field. I'm calling in from the Midwest. It's sunny, but I'm going to get some rain here. So hopefully that doesn't affect me a little later. Hopefully you're somewhere comfortable as well. I've been fortunate enough to be assisted by our training manager here. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, thanks, Odell, for allowing me to introduce myself. Hey, everybody. My name is Josh Peralta. I'm training manager at Sumo. If you joined yesterday, you probably remember me. If not, that's fine. Either way. But Odell has a great class. What we're going to be doing today is going through the query language and how it works and how to utilize it and some really good examples. So if there's any questions for today or comments or feedback or what have you, go ahead and post them in the chat and I'll help answer. But otherwise, Odell is the man for today. And let's take it away.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right. So what are we going to cover here? What's our agenda? Again, I'll give you an introduction and objectives. Again, that 500-foot overview, again, like a recap. Then you and I, this is a strictly hands-on course, okay? So you and I will get in and we'll start doing searches. We'll parse. We'll look at some field extraction rules, FERs. We'll do some conditional and filtering operations. We'll plot objects on a map. We'll format our results. We'll look at some moving and rolling averages. We'll identify some trends, some outliers, and some comparisons. And then we'll create an alert. Then after our lecture and labs, that 2-hour session, you'll then have an opportunity again to get the exam and get certified. Now, again, as we mentioned yesterday, we're glad that you're taking the test. We want to reward you for it. We're going to give you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. I'll post this link as we get towards the exam. Okay. Some of you have taken courses with me earlier this week, or you take the course yesterday. You can put all of your exams in one link if you want to. Okay. Anyhow, I'm going to save some bandwidth again here. You've been with me. I want you to focus on the slides and the lecture. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my video here for you. Let you focus. This is sort of a recap. So those of you that were with me yesterday, just bear with me. Okay. Those of you, this is your first time. What you're seeing on the screen right here is 4 examples of dashboards that can be created in our tool. You're going to hear me start referring to it as the CIP, the Continuous Intelligence Platform. So in the CIP, and these are dashboards that can be created. Now, if you think back about my introduction, I talked about I was in DevOps at one particular time in my career, very early on. And here you're seeing where we could build dashboards to glean information about how our systems are doing, if they're all up and running, if there is any mean time that I need to resolve or identify. So those types of pieces of information I could glean from an operational dashboard. From a security perspective, I can find out if anyone's using root access, if anyone's where they're logging in from around the world, if users are logging in from multiple locations simultaneously. Again, I can glean that information from a security perspective dashboard. From a business perspective, I can find out about a marketing campaign that we issued, if it's successful or not. I can find out what pages that my customers are frequently viewing. Those type pieces of information we can glean from a business intelligence dashboard. And then finally, from a global perspective, we want to compare our data versus other companies globally. So we want to look at a global perspective about our data comparative to other companies. So again, those were just 4 examples of dashboards that can be created in the CIP. Now, what are we going to use to create those dashboards? We're going to use that machine data that you have, those metrics, those logs, those traces, all of your logs, metrics, and traces, all of that machine data, we're going to capture it and use it to build those dashboards. So if your data is in the apps or cloud or wherever your data, mobile devices, third party, again, we're going to utilize that data to build those dashboards. What do we offer as a company? We offer analytics, okay? We're a multi-tenancy environment. Security is priority number 1. One of our core values is we're in it with our customers. Okay, you're going to see some machine learning and some advanced analytics. I mentioned that in our fundamentals course. Some companies like to incorporate Sumo logic, so they use the APIs, the application programming interfaces. As I mentioned, security is priority number 1 for us. You're seeing our attestments over here on this layer. We're SOC 2 certified, FedRAMP certified, HIPAA certified. Our certifications are up to date and we take them seriously. And then finally, your business, your company. We have a single point of entry where we can share across all layers of your company. Again, this is allowing us to collaborate, speedy decisions from a single source. And the bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is you can share your findings across your organization. So again, the big takeaway from this screenshot is 1, you can build dashboards. 2, we're going to use your logs, your metrics, your machine data. 3, we offer analytics for you. Security is priority number 1. We're a multi-tenancy environment. And 4, your people can share their work. Another repeat slide, ladies and gentlemen. This is a data flow, okay? We need to get your logs and metrics into our Sumo logic environment. How do we do that? We use something called a collector, okay? And we talked about collectors. You're going to learn more about collectors when you take the administration course, okay? That course is offered tomorrow if you're interested. But the data collection piece, the first piece there, again, it has your collectors. Your collectors, remember, they encrypt, compress, and send your logs and your metrics into our Sumo environment. Your collectors also define your sources as well, okay? Once we have your logs and metrics and that machine data in our environment, then you and I will begin to search and analyze and use operators and display our results in different types of charts. That's where we're going to spend most of our time today, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Then we can visualize and monitor by setting up dashboards and alerts. Okay. So again, that's just our workflow. Get the data in, build some searches and some analysis, and then build some visualizations, dashboards and alerts. Okay. We use metadata tags to address our logs and metrics, and once they're in the Sumo environment, you're seeing different types of metadata tags here. Okay, so for example, you see the collector metadata tag. You can equate that to a host name. Your source name metadata tag, you can add a name and a path for the log file. The one that we're going to use most often, the one that's in bold, our best practice, is the underscore source category. This one can be freely configured. For example, we can equate the underscore source category to labs Apache era, or labs Apache access, or AWS region East Apache access, or my app Apache access. So again, it's freely configurable. All right, let's go ahead and get into the environment. Again, I want you all to think of a number, a 3-digit number from 1 to 999. I want you to put that number in the chat. I'll put the credentials in the chat for you. You guys, ladies and gentlemen, are logging into our training environment. Our training environment, we manage that. We know what's going on in there. Okay, so again, we're going to allow you to join that training environment. And as I mentioned yesterday to some of you, you have access to this training environment until the first Monday of the next month. We just changed the password this past Monday. Okay. Thank you all for putting your numbers in the chat. Again, you're using our credentials. I'm going to demonstrate how you're going to log in, if you can watch me, if you haven't done this before. So you're going to open up a browser. In that browser, you'll type in service.sumologic.com. Once you type that in the browser, you're going to get a welcome screen that wants you to log in. And you're going to use the credentials that we have. Okay. Let me just do something real quickly. Sorry about this. Glad, Stefan, you're in. Great. Thanks for letting me know you're in. Those that are logged in, again, confirm that you've logged in. That would be awesome as well. And I'm about to log in as well. Again, if you're having any troubles logging in, please let us know in the chat. As I mentioned, you're going to get to this screen and you're going to type in the word training and then plus symbol, and then the word analyst. And then you'll put in your 3-digit number, okay, at sumologic.com. Okay, so hopefully everyone's following along. You're just putting your 3-digit numbers in, replacing where I have mine, and then you're going to use the password of the uppercase SECURITY 22 exclamation mark. So security is what we're using. Again, let us know if you have any problems logging in. Please confirm that you've logged in so we won't leave anyone. Petra, if you could use another number, that would be great. So use another number, Petra. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kevin. Glad you guys are in. Again, I don't want to leave anyone, so I'm just going to wait for another second or so to allow others to make sure they're logging in. That's fine if you use the same numbers yesterday. That's fine. All right. So again, if you have problems, still saying lock with a different number. So Petra, are you using service.sumologic.com? That should be the URL you're using. Okay. And make sure training plus analyst, use the number 684. Try that number. All right. Again, for those of you that have logged in, good job. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'll go ahead and continue on. Again, if you have problems, go ahead and put them in the chat. Josh is manning the chat for us as well. So again, just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, here's your navigation panel over to the left. I'm not gonna use that too often here, so I'm gonna go ahead and close mine. Okay. And I want us all to go ahead and make sure we're on the home tab and the learn link. Make sure you're on the home tab and the learn link. If you recall, yesterday I talked about the learn link. We give you those videos to learn more about our environment. Okay. You see the fundamentals labs in the left corner. Next to it, you see the administration labs. We're not going to use either of those because we're in the search mastery. If you recall, yesterday I demonstrated where you could actually get the courses, and that's what we're going to do now. So let's go ahead, make sure you're all on the home tab, the learn link. Let's click on the documentation, the docs box in the bottom right corner. And go ahead and click on the start here. Odell, what are we doing? Well, I'm demonstrating where you're going to get the labs for this class. Okay? And this is where you get all our labs at, okay? Or most of our labs, I should say. So once you're here on the left-hand side in the menu bar over there to the left, the margin, go ahead and click on the phrase Quick Start Labs and Tutorials. Once you click on that, then you'll see links to our courses. And you and I want the search mastery. Okay, again, go ahead and click on that search mastery. I'll place it in the chat just for some of you that may be having troubles. Now, if you're in a Google Chrome environment, one of the techniques that you can utilize is you can pin your tabs. So I'm going to go ahead and pin my labs. And what the advantage there is, it allows me to quickly toggle between my labs and the CIP. It's not mandatory you do it. I'm just showing you a nice technique. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone's in. We have our hands-on labs available. The introduction basically says, hey, you're logging into our training environment. So we've done all that. Okay. I'm going to continue on to lab number 1, searching basic metadata. All right, now, again, we're going to take you rather slowly first, then we're going to build some momentum. So you're going to see these little basic queries that we do at the beginning, then we'll start enhancing them, okay? So again, we want to learn about these types of techniques so we can improve performance. That's the key thing. We want to improve the performance, okay? So I like grabbing the code to make it easier to type and things of that sort. So the first thing we're going to do is here, and you can type these in as well. We're going to go ahead and grab under number 1 and copy that actual expression under number 1. Let's go back to our CIP. And let's go ahead and click on the new button, the new blue button, and we want to do a new log search. If you get any pop-up informational messages, you can just skip them. Remember, when you open up a new log search, it's going to have a default time period of the last 15 minutes, okay? Let's go ahead and paste in our query. And let's remind ourselves what this query is actually doing. So if we take a look here, we're using that favorite metadata tag that Odell's been harping about all week, source category. We're equating that metadata tag to our Apache access logs. We want to bring back all our log access messages for the last 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and run this. So as a reminder, we get a histogram minute by minute breakdown. Below the histogram, we get our status, it's done. We get the elapsed time, and we get the total amount of results, okay? Your numbers may not match mine, that's not important, okay? So I see I have 6,000 results for my access log messages. Over to the left, I see a messages tab. I see the fields that are going to be displayed, time and message. To the right of that, I see the time it happened and the physical message. I see I'm looking at page 1 of 268 pages. Okay, I remember that again, my pages are 25 items per page. All right, now let's go ahead and append to this expression. Remember yesterday I talked about the AND operator, and I said that it was implied, it was optional. So we don't necessarily have to type in the AND, but it may be easier for people to understand. We're also going to use a keyword. In this example, we're going to use a number, and we're going to place that number in quotations. So we're telling the actual tool, we want you to look at all of our access log messages, and we only want the 404, the ones with 404 status codes. Okay, and we're going to run that for the last 15 minutes. So all we did, ladies and gentlemen, was add an and the 404 in quotes. Okay, and we're running that in the last 15 minutes. Again, we're using the quotes because it's a numeric value. All right, now you'll see here if I remove the and Josh also puts in there, we don't need the quotes, so good, thank you, Josh. You'll see that I removed the and my query will still work. Again, the and is implied. My 404s are all highlighted and returned, so it's still working. Okay, and I'll go over that without the quotes as well for you. So if I run this without the quotes, I still get the same message. Okay, good question. Thank you. Keep them coming. I'll put it back to what we have in the lab so we can stay consistent. So we're seeing all of our messages. Notice the number is less than what we saw originally. We're seeing only 192 results. We're looking at page 1 of 8 pages. Why did that happen, Odell? Because we added the 404. So we added a keyword to narrow our results. Okay, let's go ahead and highlight that 404. Let's highlight that 404. Okay, we're going to replace that 404 with an open paren, the word error, and the operator or, and we're going to type in the word check, and then we're going to add an asterisk as a wildcard. So let me just explain what's going on. We're still going against the source category. We're still going against our access log messages, but this time as a keyword, we want our access message to have either error or anything that begins with the word check. Case insensitive, case insensitive. Good question, Jose. So again, we're going to run this and we'll run that as well for the last 15 minutes. All right, so here we have it. If you scroll through, we can see we have 112 results. We're looking at page 1 of 5, and I can scroll through and see that my checkouts are highlighted. And if there were any errors, they would be highlighted as well. Okay. So again, we're just showing you examples of keywords and the and operator as well as the or operator. Okay, and you guys have some great questions I see that you're asking, so that's awesome. All right, now let's highlight access and everything to the right of that. Okay, let's highlight that. And let's replace it with error. So we want to look at our error log messages now. And we want to change the time period. We want to look at our errors for the last 45 minutes. Now, when you click on the actual time, remember you have 3 tabs there. You have the relative time that has some predefined times there for you. You have a recent time. If you've recently used the tool, you'll see something there. And then you'll have a customs time where you can use a date time. Now, what you notice in the relative time is you don't have a 45 minutes. You don't have that, okay? You may have it in recent, but let's imagine that you didn't have it at all. Well, how should am I restricted to only do what they have? No, you're not. So in order to change it to 45 minutes, go ahead and highlight whatever's there. Highlight whatever time period is there, okay? And whenever you want to type in your own time period, start out with a minus symbol. Again, start out with a minus symbol. And then type in 45. Now, if we want to do minutes, we do M. If we wanted to do hours, we do H. If we want to do days, we do D. Excuse me. If we wanted to do days, we would do D. So again, that's the technique to actually put your own time period. Okay, let's go ahead and run it. So first of all, I want you to realize we're going against a different source. We're going against our errors. So our messages are different than what we saw in our access. So be aware of that, all right? So here's our histogram. Here's the actual status of done, the time. We have over 5,000 results. We see our messages. And if I look at this particular error message, the first one I see, it has the date, and then it has the some more information. You might get an ID there and some more information. So it's just configured differently than our access messages, okay? Again, you're seeing 1 of 25. Remember, as a reminder, if you wanted to change the number of items you see per page, you can go to the gear symbol and click on the display message preferences. If you wanted to export out these values, you go to the gear symbol on the messages tab and you export them out, okay? Those are just reminders in case you see them on a test somewhere. All right, just kind of quickly going back to the lab to show you what we've done so far. So we've done this, number 3, we've done number 4 so far. So we've done up to number 4 so far if you're following along, okay? All right, now let's go back to our CIP. Let's go ahead in this particular expression, let's add an OR operator, okay? Now I want to demonstrate the typing ahead for you. If you notice after you type the OR, you'll see a bunch of metadata tags. We want to add that other source, that access source. So we can easily type or we can click. So if I want to choose my source category, I can then type after that labs, and then I'll add a slash and I want Apache, and then I can choose access. I'm just showing you different techniques, ladies and gentlemen. We could have easily copied and pasted that here. We could have typed it all out. I'm just giving you different ways, okay? All right, so again, we want our error log messages or our access messages. And again, we'll run it for the same time period. Let's go ahead and run that. Now, if you peruse through these messages, you can see that they're coming from different sources. So one of the things that I notice when I look at my messages, I can see where it came from. So these came from a Lab Apache error. But if I keep scrolling, I'll eventually get to Lab Apache Access. So here's one from Lab Apache Access. I can see that that message is formatted differently. My Apache accesses start out with an IP address. where my errors start out with a timestamp. So again, those messages are formatted differently from those different sources. Okay. Now, I want to introduce you to something, and we're going to talk more about it coming up. Okay. But if I wanted to see the percentages from each source, one technique that we can use, and we're going to build on this, is I can click on in my field browser, ladies and gentlemen, just watch me first. I can click on the word source category, not the checkbox, the word. If I click on that word, what it does for me, it gives me a breakdown of those 28,000 messages. 22,000 of them come from access. 5,000 come from error. So again, all I did was click on my source category in my field browser to get a percentage breakdown. Okay, we'll talk more about the field browser coming up. I just wanted to tease you a little bit there. Okay, all right, I can click on it and close it out. Anyhow, let's continue on. Let's go back up to our query and let's highlight everything from error all the way over to the right. Everything, highlight that. And yesterday I talked about our tool is similar to SQL, and we have some features like the wildcard. That's what we're going to do. We're going to replace what's highlighted with a wildcard. So your statement should read like mine. Underscore source category equals labs Apache asterisk. So this is essentially telling us, bring back everything under the Apache directory. Well, just to give you a tip, there's only two. There's the error and the access. So let's go ahead and run this as well. And again, we're illustrating and demonstrating that you can use wildcards. So notice I'm done. Now I'm bringing back both sources. So I got 28,000 messages. I'm looking at page 1 of 1,154. I can see there's 25 per page and so forth and so on. Now I can do that technique that Odell teased us about. I can go over into my field browser and click on the phrase source category, and I can see the breakdown. Okay, it's essentially the same. Okay, awesome. Okay. Now let's go ahead and click on the new button. And let's click on live tail. And let me just discuss live tails at a high level real quickly. Live tails is where you can view the messages as they're being ingested into Sumo. Okay, this is typically done by an administrator. Now, we at Sumo Logic have a governor set on live tails, and that governor is a 10 live tail limit. And what that means is only 10 concurrent live tails can be run at a one particular time. All right, so you might see this when we start typing. So go ahead and type in the underscore source category. Again, case insensitive. Underscore source category, make sure you spell it correctly. Make it equal to labs / Apache / access. Case insensitive. Add a space. We're not using the and operator because it's implied. Let's type in the number 404 and then click run. Some of you may get an alert that, hey, 10 concurrent is the max. We've reached the max. Okay. But again, be aware this is it's going to work for you. So give it a moment and it'll start. You'll start seeing messages ingested. Okay. Now, what you may notice that's different than a log search, when we use the 404, it's not highlighting our messages. Okay. So we want to highlight that 404. We come over to the right, you'll see the phrase that Apple, that A, and we type in 404 and hit the enter key. And now our 404s are running. Okay. Yes, Mohit and Joseph, as I mentioned, you may get that message that 10 live concurrents are running because it's about 40 of us in this class. So if all of you are clicking on it, you're in our training environment. So you're gonna hit the limitation, okay? All right, so you can see now through here that all of my 404s are highlighted. One other thing I wanna demonstrate to you real quickly here is you also have the ability to run it with wildcards as well. So you notice I put an asterisk there, and now I'm getting my messages as well. All right, so going back to the labs. All right, the lab guide. So we left off, we did number 4, did number 5, number 6, and we just completed number 7. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the true false questions to get your minds in gear and ready for taking the exam after we finish all the labs. True, false. You can put these in the chat window there. Okay, true or false. Keywords are case sensitive. Jose, I want you to answer that one. That's correct. False. False. Everything is case insensitive. Thank you. Question number 2. And is implicit and ors are explicit. Mohit, yes, you're correct. Florina, yes, you're correct. It's true. Thank you, Brad. Yes, thank you for participating. Thank you, Ryan. Yes. Question number 3. Keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tail. Yep, you saw the last example. I showed you the asterisk. Yep, that's correct. Thank you for participating, Ryan and Andrew. Kahiti, sorry if I mispronounced your name. I apologize. And Petra, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep going. You guys are doing awesome. Let's click on simple parsing, grouping, and filtering, lab number 2 in the bottom right corner. So we're going to build a little momentum here. You got your feet wet, okay? All right, now, this chapter, we're going to look at some more operators. We're going to look at operators to parse and group our results, okay? So let's go ahead and highlight what's under number 1. Highlight everything that's under number 1 there. So that's the source category and the count by. Highlight that. Let's go back to our CIP. You can close all the tabs. So if you have multiple tabs, just go to one of them and close them all. We're done. We don't need those. Okay. Let's create a new log search. A new log search. And we're going to go ahead and paste in our expression. Yesterday, I introduced some of you that participated with me yesterday. I introduced you with the ability to comment out your lines of code. To comment out that line, I'm using a double slash. You don't need to do this. I just want you to understand what's going to happen. So that's why I'm breaking it down for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this source category, Labs Apache, everything underneath it, bring back everything underneath it for the last 15 minutes. Okay. So this is going to bring back errors and Apache for the last 15 minutes, okay? What I want to point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, is one, when I ran that query, I have no ability to display these results in a chart. You learned yesterday, and some of you learned from the fundamentals course, that in order to display your results in a chart, you have to have an aggregate. Min, max, count, average. You have to have an aggregate or a group by in order to display your results in the chart. So this next line, which I'm going to uncomment now, is using the pipe symbol, which means continue our expression. And it's using an operator, the count by. And it's counting by source. Now, I want to digress for a moment. We're going to get more in depth about this. How did it know to count by the word source, Odell? I don't see source anywhere. Well, we're going to talk about our field browser and field extraction rules coming up. So basically during ingestion, just to give you a excuse me, just to kind of give you a high level. I'm sorry, I'm talking so quickly. Just to try to give you a high level. These fields over here that are actually hidden, they were parsed out during ingestion into Sumo. We'll talk more about it, but again, this source word here is actually coming from my display fields. We're going to count by our source. So let's go ahead and run that. That count by, as I mentioned, is going to give us an aggregate. So I still have my original messages tab, but now since I have a count by, I have an aggregates tab. Okay, and I'm seeing both of my sources. I could have also, just to remind you, I could have just clicked on the name here, source category, and saw those same values that I'm seeing on the aggregates tab. Okay, anyhow, let's continue on. We want to now use a parse. Okay, now in my fundamentals course, if you've taken the course with me, we used a parse. But the type of parse that we use was a parse anchor. And I'm going to digress for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to my favorite resource, which should also be yours or one of yours, okay? And I'm just going to type in parse operators. I just want to remind you of the different types of parse operators. So I search for parse operators in my help, and I'm choosing the first one. You don't need to do this. I'm just digressing for a moment. So as I mentioned, and you might have had a quiz or an exam question on this, there's multiple types of parsing. Yesterday, we used the parsing anchor, which was position-based, which means if you moved the position incorrectly, you got it wrong. Today, we're going to use a parse regex. We would use that if our messages are not formatted the same. So pulling things all the way back together. If you recall, ladies and gentlemen, when we looked at the access logs and the error logs, the messages were formatted differently. So we're going to use the regex because the messages are formatted differently. If they were all formatted the exact same, we could use the parse anchor. Okay, anyhow, I digressed. I was long-winded. Let's go ahead and highlight under number 2 the last 2 lines. We just want the bottom 2 lines. Okay, again, highlight number 2, the bottom 2 lines. Go ahead and copy that. And let's go ahead and Jose, you can go back to the help and you can look at the XML parsing to get more information on that. Again, don't be afraid to look at that help for yourselves. All right, going back to our CIP. And we want to replace the last line of our code. So go ahead and highlight that line, and let's paste our actual results. If this is not working for you, ladies and gentlemen, you can always copy the entire query. Again, I was just trying to save us some time. I'm going to comment out those 2 lines, those last 2 lines, to kind of demonstrate what's going to happen. All right, so we're running this for the last 15 minutes. So this next line of code is a parse regex. The way it reads is, I'm going to create a new field called IP address. I want you to search for 1 to 3 digits and a period, 1 to 3 digits and a period, 1 to 3 digits and a period, and 1 to 3 digits. That sounds like an IP address to me. So what this parse regex is going to do is going to go through all the messages, look for that pattern, and pull out the IP address. Okay, I'm just going to run those 2 lines of code so you can step through it and see what's going on. So here's our actual results. Let's take a look at our messages tab. notice in our messages tab, we have a new field. It's called IP address. Odell, how did that field get there? Where did it come from? In our parse regex function here, statement operator, here it is. This is the new field. That's why it's there. If we look at our results over to the right, we see we have time as a column header, and we have IP address as a column header, and our message. Now let's go through some of these just to kind of visually see how it worked. So if I look at my access messages, the IP address is first. So it was easy to grab that, no problem. Now, if we look at some of our errors, let me find one here. We'd have to see that it had to go through further in the code. Let me just go down a few pages here. And I want to demonstrate to you. All right, so here's one. Thought I just saw it. I want to show you that that message is formatted differently. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. Okay, let me go to the end maybe. All right, I'm just looking for some error log messages to show you that it's different, but be aware that those messages are formatted different. I'll show you later when we keep going, okay? Now, the next thing that we have here in this, after we've parsed out the actual IP address, we now want to count by. Again, that count by is going to do a couple things. It's going to give us a new tab because it's an aggregate, okay? And it's going to count by our IP addresses. So let's go ahead and run that. And we're running this for the last 15 minutes. So what we gather here is from each IP address, we can get the amount of messages from each IP address. Whether they're error messages or access messages, whatever under Apache, we're seeing those IP addresses and the amount of messages coming from them. Okay. All right, now we want to add a new line of code, just a new line. So we are going to place our cursor at the end of the count by statement. Place your cursor at the end of the count by statement. In order to add a new line, you either use Shift Return or Alt Enter. Again, Shift Return or Alt Enter should work for you. And I'm going to add 2. You don't need to add 2. I like adding 2 so you can visually see things. And then paste. Whoops, sorry, you're not pasting. You're typing in where count is greater than 500. So just watch me and you can type in. So we're adding the pipe symbol first, type in an where clause. Notice when we type in our operators, they change colors. We want our where, and we're using a placeholder technique. So we're using an underscore, and we're going to type in the word count. Then we're going to add a space, use the greater than symbol, and 500. So what we're saying in this last line of code is, hey, return where my count is greater than 500. You notice that our count operator doesn't have an underscore, but our placeholder does. And that's what the technique you want to utilize. Okay, and we can go ahead and run that. So of all of the IP addresses across both of sources, these are the IP addresses that have more than 500 messages. Now, one other thing we can do, be aware, since we have that count by, not only does it give us an aggregates tab, but it also exposes us to different types of charts. So let's go ahead and click on the pie chart. So now we can see our breakdown in a pie chart. Odell, I'd rather see the numbers though. Do I have to run the query again? No. All you have to do is click on that very first icon, the table icon, and now you're back to your results. All right. So let's go to our lab guide to see where we are. So we did number 1, number 2, and we did number 3. We'll get there, Brad. We're going to do a plot chart coming up. And we did number 3, and we displayed that out. Okay. Let's go ahead and grab all of what's under number 4. Again, let's grab all of what's under number 4, please. In a new query, we're going to identify the top 10 source IP addresses by bandwidth usage. This requires us to parse out the byte sizes. So let's copy and create a new log search. I'm going to close the old one. I don't need that anymore. And I'll create a new log search. And let's paste. And again, I'm going to comment out my last 3 lines of code. You don't necessarily have to do this. Again, I want to walk you and step you through the actual code. All right, so again, I'm running source category, but this time I'm only going against my access messages. We're using a parse regex. We could use a parse anchor as well. That would work. But again, we're using a regex where we're creating a new field called IP address. It's looking for that pattern again. Okay. So again, that part you guys should be comfortable with. This time we're only going against one source. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the message, I'm going to just look at the first message. I see the IP address. I see the timestamp. I see the get message, okay? I see the URL, and then I see the status code and the size, okay? This next statement in our code reads, look for 200. Once you find 200, the next field after that is going to be called size. So if I go here, here's 200. It found it. The next field after that, we're going to deem size. Okay, so I'll run that. So it's going to parse out the size. You'll notice that with the parse anchor, notice that my numbers decrease. Let me do this again for you real quickly. I'm running it without the parse anchor, and I get over 6,000. Run it with it. And again, I get a smaller number because it's parsing out that value. Okay, it's looking for 200 and parsing out that value. Okay, next, we're using the sum operator. Now remember, in order to get to display your results in a chart of some type, you have to have an aggregate. Well, sum is an aggregate. We're going to sum our size. Remember, size was what we parsed out, and we're going to call it total bytes. We're summing by our IP addresses. So we'll run that. So now we have multiple column headers. Okay, if I go back to my messages tab, I see I have my IP address and my size. So that's on my message tab. The sum generated an aggregates tab. So now I'm seeing the total bytes by each IP address from my access messages. And then lastly, you'll notice if you look at your results that there aren't they are not in any order. Okay. The top operator by default sorts things in descending order. Again, the top operator sorts objects in descending order by default. You're going to notice that there's a few operators that we have that sort descending order by default. Top is one of them. So I'll go ahead and run this. I'm getting the top 10 IP addresses by total bytes. So I'll see the total bytes are in descending order, and these are the top 10 IP addresses. Okay. All right, going back to our lab guide here. All right, awesome, good stuff, good job. Let's keep it going. Let's click on lab 3, parsing options. Jose, yeah, you could do that as well. You could show the 200 if that's what you wanted to do. There aren't any, were there any bonus questions? I didn't see any bonus questions there for that chapter. Mohit. Oh, okay. You were talking about the bonus average. Oh, okay, yeah. All right, let's go ahead on to lab 3. Lab 3 here. Now, this is a very good information for you, ladies and gentlemen. JSON files, okay? By default, we have in our tool dynamic parsing mode. That option is turned on, okay? I'll show you where it is coming up. That dynamic parsing allows automatic field extraction from your JSON log messages when you run a search. Now, the advantage is this allows you to view the fields from your JSON logs without having to parse them. Dynamic parsing extracts JSON fields when you run a query at search time. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy what's under number 1. Copy what's under number 1. And let's create a new log search. Again, a new log search. And let's paste it in there. Now I'm going to comment out the count by because I want you to see we're going against a different source. We're going against our AWS CloudTrail. Okay, so the source category is still there, but again, we're going against our CloudTrail logs. So I'm going to run that for the last 15 minutes. Now, what I want you to first realize, ladies and gentlemen, is up here in your query, there's a gear symbol that has some options. The auto parse mode, if you hover over the I, it kind of tells you it's going to extract fields when you run your messages. Okay, the advantage of that is you don't have to build any parsing. Okay, now let's take a look. Now that option is turned on automatically. Okay, and let me demonstrate what's going on. So let me look at the first message, the first CloudTrail log message here. So I see key and values, keys and values, keys and values all the way through. Okay, if I look at my field browser, that's this thing over here, we call this the field browser. Okay, if I scroll down, I'll see all of these fields have been parsed out from these messages. Okay, and if I take a look, for example, at user identity, I see a little arrow there. That means it has more items underneath it. So it has more fields. So if I go down in my field browser and I go to user identity, I see all of those additional fields that I just opened up. Okay, now let me turn that off so you can see the advantage of why we have it on. You're just watching. I'm going to turn off this auto parse and I'll rerun the query. So just as you're thinking, you're right. It's not going to parse out these key values in the field, the key and the value. It won't parse it out. So if I look at my list here, it doesn't have all those fields. But Odell, where did these come from? Well, we also have a field extraction rule that we're going to talk about later. Field extraction rule. This came with once you ingest into Sumo. All right. Anyhow, I'm going to turn that back on. I just demonstrated to you the advantages of this auto parsing mode. Okay, and I'm going to rerun the query. And that should be right where you should be. So all my fields are parsed out. All right, awesome. Okay, now the next line of code, you know what it's going to do already. It's going to give you that aggregates tab because it's counting by. It's counting by AWS region. Now here's the same type of example that we saw in the last chapter. Here's a field that we don't even know exists, the AWS region. But doing the parsing, we see that AWS region is one of our fields here. Here it is, AWS region. If I click on it, I can see the breakdown of everything as well, okay? So we're gonna count by the AWS region. I'll go ahead and run that. And we have our aggregates tab, just as we expected, because we have that count by, and we're seeing the total amount of messages from each region, okay? All right, going back to our lab here. We'll take a break shortly, ladies and gentlemen, just hanging there with me. We want to now introduce you to the no drop, okay? This is for parsing operators. It allows users to include messages in your results that don't meet the pattern. What I tried to show you earlier in that earlier example where we had parse, find the 200, it filtered out, okay? The no drop is going to say, hey, this field, this doesn't meet your criteria, but we're going to display it anyway. I'll show you coming up shortly. Let's go ahead and just grab the query under number 2 and copy that, and let's create a new log search. Again, we're going against our error log messages for the last 15 minutes. Remember, I was going to show you how they were formatted differently than the Apache. And remember, Apache has an IP address first, whereas the error messages have the actual timestamp first. Okay, so they're formatted different. I just wanted to point that out again. Anyhow, so I see my messages. Okay, next, step number 2 here, we're going to go ahead and add that parse statement. So you're just highlighting the second part of the item. The parse statement, you're copying that. And let's add a new blank line. So let's place our cursor at the end of the current line, hit the Alt Enter or Shift Enter, Shift Return, and add a new line. All right, now let's take a look at this parse statement before we actually run it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a look at it. It's saying parse find bracket client. So it found bracket client. It says the next field after that is going to be called client IP. So it's going to find the IP. But notice here, there's no IP. Go down, there's no IP. So some of these error log messages don't have an IP. Maybe it's a private IP address. Okay, we only capture public IP addresses. So maybe that's an issue. Okay, so when we run this parse, it's only going to bring back where the criteria is met. Okay, so if we run that, again, it's only bringing back where there was an IP address. Okay, where the phrase client, where the phrase client was, it only brought that back. Okay, so if I comment this out real quickly, just to kind of show you there's a difference here. If I run this original message, I see that I have over 1,800 results. If I add the parse, which is going to filter out, my result set is much less. I have half of that now. Okay, now we could use the no drop, and you all can type this at the end of the parse statement, the no drop. So what that is saying to the parse statement is bring back the message even if it doesn't meet your criteria. So if it doesn't have client asterisk, bring it back anyway. That's what the no drop operator is going to do for us. So let's go ahead and run that. And you're going to see where there isn't an IP address, it still brought the actual item back. Where you don't see the client, it still brought it back. Okay, so that's the advantage of the no drop. All right, let's add a new line of code, Let's go ahead and start out with the pipe symbol because we want to continue our expression. And let's start out with a parse operator. And we're going to type in quotes, mod underscore log underscore SQL. And we also want to add after that the colon and the space. And then we'll add an asterisk. So you could have gone and just copied this statement here. Number 3, you could have copied that right there. And I'll put it in the chat for you. Again, I like typing just to kind of show you some of the actual features of the tool. All right, let's talk about what this next line is doing, okay? It's saying parse where you find mod log SQL, colon. The next phrase or the next field after that colon is going to be my message. So if we take a look here and we look for that mod, let's find one of them real quickly here. And we're going to find that mod item. Here's one right here. So here it's looking for mod colon. The next field after that, we're going to call message. So it's going to parse through that and find that as well. Okay. So notice now you have a client IP column and a message column. So when there isn't an IP, there should be a message. When there isn't a message, there should be an IP. All right, let's go back to our lab guide. So we just did number 4. All right, awesome. All right, now we're now going to introduce you to other operators such as is empty, is blank, or is null. But what I want to first do for you, ladies and gentlemen, is actually bring up my help to kind of give you some benefits of those differences, the differences between the three. So I'm just going to type in my is empty. You don't have to do this. I'm just giving you extra information here because I want you to know that there's a difference between is empty and is blank. The is empty contains no characters, there's only white space. The is blank is the same, but it has nulls. Okay, so again, be aware this is there for you. You can always come out and search it on our help for yourselves. All right, so let's go ahead and highlight what's under number 5. We'll grab it all. Again, even though it's only adding the where is blank, we can grab it all, make it simple. Go back to our code here, and we can just replace what's there by highlighting and pasting. All we did really, ladies and gentlemen, was add the is blank, okay? So again, when there isn't an IP address, that's what we want to show you, okay? So when there isn't an IP address, it should read the mod log SQL. So let's go ahead and run that. As I mentioned, that where statement is saying where the client IP is blank. So I can go through here and I can see there's no IP for these. I have over 476 results. I'm looking at one of 20 pages. All right, back to our lab guide. You guys are doing awesome. Just a little bit more and we'll take a break. All right, next, parse fields. Now, someone asked this either yesterday or today. I think it was today. Someone asked about, can I order, put my fields in the order that I want them to display? And I told them, yes, there's a field operator that you could use, okay? So what we're gonna do first, ladies and gentlemen, we're on number 6. We're gonna use the parse field option, which allows us to do further parsing on an already extracted field. Now, in case this comes up on an exam somewhere, let me reread this statement for you. The parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field. In this example, we want to identify the top 5 committers in the GitHub. The search committers in the last 30 days, and we're going to parse out our email address. So let's highlight whatever's under number 6, create a new log search in our CIP. Create a new log search in our CIP, and let's paste. Again, they told us we want to run this for the last 30 days. So we're going to click the time frame and change it to 30 days. I am going to comment out my parse statement and run my GitHub with the committer keyword. So I want you to bring back all the messages that have committer in them for the last 30 days. All right, so I can see, again, it's bringing back. I have up to 10,000 or so, 23,000 results here so far, 35,000, etc. Okay, now the next statement in our code says parse, look for email, okay, colon, and the next field after that is going to be called email. Okay, so it's looking for, if you take a look here, it's looking for email colon in these messages, and the next field after that is going to be called email. So that's what this parse statement is doing. So let's run that for the last 30 days. So notice in your field browser, you have a new field called email. In your results, you see the time, you see the column called email, and the message. All right, while that's running, we can go ahead and grab the next part of the code. Jose, great question. That's correct. Jose asked, will it bring back the first occurrence? And you're reading ahead. The parse brings back the first occurrence, but we're going to show you a technique for that. So just bear with us. I know you're reading ahead, so hang in there. All right, next, we're going to go ahead to number 7. Okay. And we're just going to grab the last 3 lines of that number 7, the last 3 lines, because the first 2 are the same. Okay, so let's grab the last 3 lines of code, go back to our CIP, place our cursor at the end of the last line and add another line, and then paste. I, of course, am going to comment out my lines just so you can see me walk through them. All right, so we had ran the first 2 lines of code. It parsed out the email address. Okay, the next line of code is saying parse again, but it's saying use the field operator and equate it to email. Remember, email was what we created. So we're saying parse that email. The value before the ampersand is the user. The value after the ampersand is the domain. So parse out the user and the domain from that email field. That's what that next line of code is going to do. So you now have 2 additional columns, one called users and one called email. If you take a look at your result sets, you now have your email and your users and your domain. That field operator was the key to that happening. Okay, next, of course, we want to get that aggregates tab. We're using a count by, so we're counting by one of those fields. We're counting by users. So we'll run that. All right, so it counted up, it gave us that aggregates tab. Again, the count by is going to give us that. Our original messages tab is still there. Lastly, we're going to use the top operator. We want to bring back the top 5 users by count. Remember, we're using that placeholder because, again, count is a keyword. It is one of our operators. Remember that the top is going to put it in descending order by default. So let's run that for the last 30 days. And we can see in descending order by count our top 5 users from our GitHub committers messages. Okay. Let me just digress as well. If you wanted this to be in ascending order, you just type in ASC. Okay, just type in ASC at the end of the phrase, and you can change the sort order. Okay. All right, continuing on here. The parse multi, this is what Jose was reading ahead on. The parse multi option allows you to extract multiple occurrences of the same pattern within the message. Now, here's what we're talking about. By default, parse only extracts the first occurrence. Okay, so we're going to look at our snort logs and we're going to parse out. So let's highlight that code under number 8. And let's create a new log search in our CIP, a new log search. And let's paste. I, of course, am going to comment out that line so we can see our snort logs. We'll leave it, let's make it 60 minutes and let's run it. All right, now let's look at the formatting of the message so we can get an understanding. All right. So if we take a look at our snort logs, it's saying bring back all messages. Here's an IP address. And here's an IP address in the same message. So there's 2 IP addresses. Okay. We're going to use the parse regex. Okay. We're going to create a new field called IP address. We're going to look for this format and parse out those fields. Okay. So when we run that, by default, the parse regex, it does what we ask. It does it, but we have another IP address here. So by default, this tool is only going to bring back the first occurrence. So to resolve that, we'll type in multi. So at the end of that expression, go ahead and type in multi. And now run your query. What you're going to notice in your results, here's the first IP address. Here's the second IP address. Okay. And if there was a third, it would be a third. If there was a fourth, and so forth and so on. Okay. So again, that multi pulls out multiple addresses for you. All right. Now, let's go ahead and talk about field extraction. We got a brief introduction with field extraction from our JSON files, but be aware your administrator can create field extraction rules. These rules extract fields during ingestion into Sumo logic. Okay, those field extractions allow you to extract fields so your report developers don't have to do parsing. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight under number 10. Let's highlight under number 10. And let's go ahead and create a new log message. I'm going to close all those other ones. And let's create a new one. A new log search, and let's paste. Now, I'm going to digress for a moment to demonstrate to you field extraction rules. Okay, so just watch. I'm going to go over here to my navigation panel. I'm going to go down to my main menu, go to my manage data, click on my logs. There's 5 tabs here. I'll click on my field extraction rules. This is where my administrator can create these rules. You'll notice you can't because you are not an administrator. I want to look at one of my rules to demonstrate what's going on. So here's a rule that was created. It's enabled. When is it going to be applied? At ingestion time. What's the scope? When you use Labs Apache Access, what is it going to do? It's going to parse out these fields. So in our field browser, whenever we run this particular source category, these fields will automatically be parsed out. Okay, so going back to the actual log search, I'm going to go ahead and comment these the count out for a second and run this. So these fields that are not displaying were parsed out at ingestion time. Okay, the advantage of this, I showed you one. If I wanted to know all of the source categories, I didn't have to build a query. I could just click on the actual field extracted rule, the field in my field browser. Okay, so again, if we take a look at the next statement here, it says count by SRC IP. I don't know anything about SRC IP. Where did they get that from? It was extracted based on that field extraction rule. So that's why we're counting by SRC IP. And if we run that, we'll get a result there. All right, and then finally here, let's get our results. Here we have our aggregates tab because it's a count by. And again, we have our measures. So aggregates and measures, and there's our results. These are all our 404 access messages. All right. Good job, everyone. Let's go ahead and get into the quiz, and then we'll take a break. True or false? CSV, JSON, split, key value are all parsing operators. Wow, you guys all got quiet on me. What happened? Is my mic on? Oh my goodness, wait a minute, hold on. Ryan, Brad, Talia, Petra, Allison, Florina, is that your final answer? Again, true or false? Is that your final answer? Okay, so let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen. Typically, what I say is that your final answer, the one that you gave me was wrong. Let me remind you of what you need to do. Help, sumologic.com. Once you go there, you can type in parse operators. This should have been on your test. If it wasn't, it will be. Here are the different types of parse operators. There's the anchor, there's a regex, there's a JSON, there's the key value, the CSV, and so forth. Okay, so I know you guys know these answers better than that. All right, so let's go back. So that first one is true. Now, number two, once a field has been parsed, it cannot be parsed any further. I'm just waiting on somebody to say true so I can jump down your throat. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Correct, that's false. Thank you for participating. That's false. Lastly, number three, fields parsed by field extraction rules are available in the field browser. Yeah, that's true. I just showed you that. Exactly. Absolutely. All right, awesome, guys. Let's go ahead and take our break. I'm going to put the timer up and we'll take our 5-minute break. I'll see you in 5. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that alarm didn't scare you too much. I tried to catch it. My apologies. Welcome back. Hopefully you had an opportunity to get a break, breathe, stretch, exhale, get away from the monitor for a moment. You guys are doing awesome. We just completed the chapter 3. And let me just see here, I think. All right. Let's get into chapter 4. I mean, demo 4, pardon me, lab 4. Conditional operators. We want to introduce you to the if-then expression, okay? We're going to write a query, so go ahead and copy what's under number 1 here. And we're going to run this for the last 60 minutes, but I'm going to break it down to you. So go ahead and copy whatever's under number 1 in lab 4. and create a new log search in the CIP, a new log search in the CIP. Now, let me comment out. Now, I'm going to show you a technique here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to comment out all 4 lines, the last 4 lines. Now, watch me. What I'm doing on my Mac is I'm holding down the Option key. If you don't have a Mac, you're probably going to hold down the Alt key. So your mouse is going to change. I'm going to drag and hold my left mouse pointer down. Just drag and hold it. And it draws a line to the left there. Now, anything that I type is going to be applied to all of those lines. So this is just a quicker way, a faster way for me to comment out all those lines. That's all it's doing, ladies and gentlemen. Anyhow, we're going to run this for the last 60 minutes. So again, I'm just going to change my time here into 60 minutes. I'm only running the first line of code. This is the Apache access logs. You guys should be familiar with these. All right, so the first statement there is doing a parse here. It's parsing and looking for the status code. So it's going to find HTTP, and the next field after the HTTP is the status code. So it's going to go and find that and filter that out. So I'm going to go ahead and run this for the last 60 minutes. So I have a new column called status code. Okay, and it's finding all of my 200s. Excuse me, it's finding all of my status codes and filtering them out, whatever they are. There's different ones. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, you have that feature that I talked about earlier. If I wanted to know all the status codes and their breakdown, I could just click on status code and I could see the breakdown, the percentages and the amount of numbers, okay? Anyhow, the next statement in our line of code is an if statement, okay? And it reads, if my status code equals 200, then we'll have a 1 for true. We'll have a 0 for false. We're going to create a column called successors. So again, it's going to evaluate if the status code equals 200, 1's true, 0's false. And it'll be in a successes column. Here's my success. Here's a 304. That's a 0, so it's false. It didn't meet the criteria. 200, true. 403, false. So it's going through and identifying by placing a 0 or 1, true or false, in the successes column. The next statement says, hey, by the way, look at the status code, and if it's 404, put a 1 in the column for true, else put a 0 in the column for false. The column that you're going to put these numbers in is called client errors. So now we have another column that's evaluating whether it's 400s. And that column is going to be called client errors. So of course, when it's 200, it should be a 0 because it's false, but our successes are true. Now, when it comes to 400s, it should be a true, but our successes should be a false. So it is evaluating and doing what it's supposed to do. Lastly, we're going to use an aggregate. We want to sum our successes. Well, where did successes come from, Odell? That if statement, the first if statement, the 200s. So we're going to sum those, and we're going to call them success count. We're also going to sum our client errors. Well, where did they come from, Odell? Well, they came from the if statement for the 404s. And we're going to call those client errors counts. Now, this sum is going to generate a new tab, the aggregates tab. So let's run our query. And now we have a total success counts of all 200s versus our client errors counts of those 400s, 404s. We still have our original messages tab as well. All right, so this optional test you can do on your own. I just want to point out what it's doing. So before, in the example we did, we said status codes equals a value. But in this example, we're saying status code matches and we're using the wild card. So anything that matches, that starts with 4, 400, 41,000, 41 million, whatever begins with 4, that's going to return that true, else false. Whatever begins with 5, true or else false. So that's the other example. You can do that at your leisure. All right, moving on to the next example here, lab number 5. Here we want to use subqueries to filter out. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. And you use subqueries. You know that inner query is going to be used to populate or help run the outer query. This is the same example, same type of example here, ladies and gentlemen. So if we take a look here, we're going to look at our source, our Apache Access, and we're going to identify messages, okay? And if you take a look here at our child query here, this first part of the example here, that child query is going to go look at our error logs and find a file doesn't exist keyword. Once it finds that, it's going to parse out time, error, and IP. It's going to count the IP addresses, and then it's going to give you the top IP address. That top K is a ranking. It's going to give you the top, okay? The parent child is essentially going to utilize whatever IP address comes from the child. It's going to use it as a keyword. We're going to build this example in 3 phases, ladies and gentlemen. So under number 1, let's go ahead and grab that query under number 1. That's going to be our parent query. And let's go ahead and create a new log search. And we'll run it for 60 minutes. You're familiar with this one already. We've ran this several times. We're looking at our Apache logs for the last 60 minutes. Okay. Now, we could right now put in a keyword IP address. We could do that if we wanted to. But what we want to do is we're going to use another query to provide us with the IP address. So let's go back and grab under number 2 from our log, from our lab guide. Under number 2, let's grab that. This is our child query, okay? And let's create a new log search and run our child query. So you have the old one open and you have the new one, okay? I want you to have both of them available to yourselves. Now, let's talk about what this is doing. I'm sorry, I didn't want to run that. Let's talk about what this is doing. I'm going to break it down for you. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Fat fingered it, I hit it too many times. All right, so let me go ahead and comment out these lines first of all, and we'll take it step by step. And we'll let it run it for 60 minutes. All right, so this first line, of course, is going against our error log messages, and it's looking for the keyword file doesn't exist. That's what it's looking for. So I'm gonna run that for the last 60 minutes. So it found 104 occurrences of the file doesn't exist, okay? Now, from that result set, whoops, who's fat fingering it today? From that result set, we're going to look for where we find client, okay? Once we find that client, we're gonna capture the time, we're going to capture the error, and we're going to capture the IP, but we're not going to bring back the word client, okay? So again, it's parsing, it's finding the first field, which is time, it's finding the second field, excuse me, which is error, it's finding client, and then the field after that is IP. So that's what that next line is going to do, give us a column for time, excuse me, for error and IP. Time is already there. All right, so notice I now have time, the error, and the IP, okay? And here's that message that we were using, okay? We next are going to count by the IPs. So all we're going to do is just count it. And if you take a look here, if you peruse these real quickly, they're all the same IP, okay? So when we run that, we'll see that it counted up 105 occurrences of this IP. Now, this last statement, it's kind of not necessarily needed because we only have one IP address. But again, leaning on your imagination, imagine if we had more than one IP in these result sets. We could use the top K, which means it's going to rank it. It's different than the top, which we used before. We're using the top K. It would rank the items based on the count. But since we only have one, we're just exposing you to that tool, that operator. Okay. Again, there's only going to be one IP address. So we want to use this IP address from our eras as a keyword for our access messages. So let's go back and grab under number 4. Under number 4, let's grab that entire statement under number 4, and let's create a new log search. So this brings it all together. I'm going to paste it here. There's one thing I want to do in case yours copied over like mine. I need to add this to a new line. So I'm using the shift return for my compose. Now let's talk about what it's doing. So let me go ahead and do this real quickly here. All right. So the first thing it's doing is going and bringing back our access log messages. Okay. Then you'll see we're using the operator subquery colon. So that bracket subquery colon, that's the key part of this here subquery. We're using that operator. And then here's our child query. All of this is exactly from the child. It's going against the source, the errors, it's looking for error. It has a keyword, file doesn't exist. So that's what it's looking for. It's then parsing out time, error, and IP. It's then counting, and then it's doing the top count. Okay, so all of this is the actual subquery. This last line here, ladies and gentlemen, is the second part of the key. The compose operator, IP as a keyword. So we're taking that IP that we parsed out from our error message, and we're using it as a keyword. Okay, and then we run it, and we'll bring back only that IP's information. So here you can see it's the same IP as before. Same IP. All right. There's more information, ladies and gentlemen, that you could look at by clicking on the subquery links. I would suggest you do that if you get into some heavy query building. All right, let's go ahead and go to our plotting on the line. Plotting clients on a map is what we want to do here. Now, let me just open up this geo lookup to kind of give you some more background information, okay? So first of all, be aware that we have an ongoing relationship with NewStar, okay? NewStar populates an actual database. We provide NewStar with an IP, and NewStar will provide us with longitude, latitude account, and other fields that we might want to parse out. So again, all we need to do is provide the IP, and then we'll go look it up in a table, and it will render us the fields that we want. Okay, so again, I wanted to introduce that geo lookup map for you. We're going to run a search for all Apache access logs and parse out the IP address. We'll use the IP address to search for latitude and longitude coordinates. So let's go ahead and highlight what's under number 2. Everything under number 2, let's highlight. Let's create a new log search. And let's paste. I, of course, am going to comment out. All right, so we're running this one. Let's do it for 60 minutes, just so we can get some data back. So we're looking at our access messages. We're going to parse out. So let me not comment that one out first. Let me go ahead and run this for the last 60 minutes. All right, so if we take a look at the message here, the first message here, and we look at the parse statement, the parse statement is essentially going to look for a dash dash. And once it finds that dash dash, the next field, the field before that is going to be the client IP. So let me just click here. So here's the dash dash. It's telling us the field before that is the client IP. So we're going to parse out that. It has a new column called client IP, and it parsed out that field for us. Okay. Since we have the IP, okay. Now, it's suggested, ladies and gentlemen, that you read your lookup statements from right to left. Okay. So we parsed out the IP address. We're now going to use the IP address that we parsed out and look up in the geolocation table to find the latitude and longitude. So we're providing the IP. The table is going to give us the latitude and longitude. So let's run that over the last 60 minutes. And voila, we have the latitude and longitude based on the IP address we provided. Next, we of course are going to use our aggregate and count by both the latitude and longitudes. So we have an aggregates tab that gives us the total latitude and longitudes give you the total count by each latitude and longitude grouped together, okay? We don't have this in any type of order, so we're gonna sort by count. This is one of those operators that I mentioned earlier that is going to, by default, sort in descending order, okay? And we'll run that. So now we see the coordinates of the counts of messages, okay? Now, numbers are always great. Longitude, longitude is great. It's awesome. But what would be even more of an advantage would be if we could display these latitude longitudes in a map. And we have that availability on our aggregates tab. This icon right here, it's 4 icons to the left of add dashboard. Looks like a little drop there. If you click on that, now your actual values have been plotted on a map. Okay, again, to get back to the values, you would click on the table. All right, there are some optional test your knowledges out there for you to do at your leisure. Again, we have a lot more to do, so we're going to continue on. But again, these are test your knowledge. You can do that at your leisure. All right, let's go ahead on to lab 7, calculating change and moving averages. Again, I want to talk about the difference operator and the smooth operator. So again, let me demonstrate to you the difference operator. I'm going to the help and looking at the difference operator. And basically, it's going to give you a difference between fields for consecutive rows, okay? So that's what we're going to do, get the difference. It doesn't do any sorting, okay? All right, so let's go back in here. Let's grab this code under number 1 for lab number 7. And let's run this in a new log search for the last 15 minutes. So I'm gonna close all these. And I'll add a new log search and I'll paste. All right, so let's talk about it. Before we do it, let's talk about it. So we're going against our access messages, okay? What we want to do is render our results in buckets. So this time slice operator is going to create buckets for us, okay? 1 minute buckets in this example, okay? The next choice here is the count by. I'm not running the time slice because it's really not going to show you anything, but once we run the count by, it'll be even more visible for you. So we're saying bring back our access messages, put them in 1 minute buckets, count by those 1 minute buckets. So we run that over the last 15 minutes. Of course, that count by is going to give us an aggregate. So we can see the number of messages on a minute per minute. Notice these minutes are not any order at all. They're not consecutive. So here's where I was talking about earlier, you ladies and gentlemen. We do have that sort by or order by. You can use either one of those. And we're saying sort by time slice, and we're telling it literally in ascending order. Okay. So again, we'll run that. So now we can look here and say, okay, at this minute, it was 160, the next minute, 50, and so forth. Okay. Now what we want to do is differentiate minute by minute. So we're using the diff operator. So it's saying diff the count. Okay. And that's going to give us a new column. And the way we would read this is the first minute here, we had 507 messages. Okay. The next minute we had 467. We subtract the 467 from the 507, we get 40. We subtract the third row from the second row, we get 96, and so forth and so on. So you're getting a difference between a minute by minute breakage. And that could kind of lead to if there's any patterns you got to look for, any anomalies or things of that sort. All right, now let's talk about the smooth operator. Okay, and the smooth operator, again, is going to give you a rolling or moving average of a field. Okay, and that's what we want to get here. So let's go back to our lab guide and let's grab what's under number 2. Again, we're going to grab what's under number 2, copy that, create a new log search. You guys are doing awesome. Good job. Hopefully you're picking up some ideas. You're getting some aha moments, etc. All right, I commented it out and we're going to run this for the last 15 minutes as well. All right, so let's talk about what it's doing. So first of all, I'm getting my access log messages. I'm giving it a wildcard. Status code equals 404. So I'm bringing back all my 404s. Okay. I'm going to render that in 1 minute buckets. Again, I'm not going to run that because it's not going to show us really anything. I'm then going to count by my error count by time slice. But Odell, where did error count come from? I could bet that it probably was a field that was extracted. Okay, so we're going to run that. All right, so we're counting and we're giving it a field called error count. There it is. So we're getting our minute by minute slices, but they're not in any order. The time is not in any order. So we're going to use the sort by. And we're putting time slice in ascending order. Now notice, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to keep reminding you of this. Whenever you refer to a operator, you want to, of course, use the placeholder technique where you're adding the underscore. So we're just saying sort by underscore time slice in ascending order. So now our time periods are in some type of chronological order, 38, 39, 40, and so forth. So I can see the error counts over each minute slice. Now I want to see my smooth error count. So I want to see my rolling averages. So we'll run that. And again, we have a column with our rolling averages. Okay, so we add the first 2 columns together, then we divide and we'll get a rolling average. Add the first 3, divide, the first 4, divide, and so forth. Okay, now the numbers are great. It's always good to look at the numbers. But another way to show two numeric values is to actually plot them on a chart. So we're going to go ahead and use a line chart. That's the 5th icon from the left, right? Okay. the line chart. Go ahead and use that. Now, if you take a look, we got two lines. It's sort of difficult to distinguish our results. Okay, we have two lines here overlapping as well. So one of the techniques that you can utilize, ladies and gentlemen, and this might appear on an exam somewhere. I don't know where, but it might appear on an exam. If I wanted to change the way my actual line chart displays, I can go over to the gear symbol, go to my change series, and change my error count chart type from a line chart to a column chart. And that makes it easier for us to distinguish our error counts over our rolling averages on a minute by minute basis. Okay, so again, if that ever appears on an exam, in order to change the look and feel of your chart, you go to change series, and you can change any of those items. All right, let's go on. We're moving on to find the needle in the haystack, lab number 8. Some of you may be familiar with the log reduce. I used this yesterday or in my fundamentals course if you've taken it. The log reduce is going to create patterns, and it's going to give you a signatures tab. Okay, we're going to run a log reduce on our snort security data to identify any unusual activity, any intrusions. So let's go ahead and highlight that, create a new log search. And I'm going to go ahead and turn mine off. Okay, and just run my snort logs for the last 60 minutes. So here's my messages. I can see there was some attempted information leaks. There's some sensitive data, some web application attacks, etc. Okay, so I can see that I have over 6,000 messages, over 243 pages. I would like for the tool to use some of that machine learning that it has and group the like messages together. So I'm just going to click on the log reduce. I could uncomment or click on the log reduce. Either or works. I just want to demonstrate either or works, ladies and gentlemen. So for the last 60 minutes, I'm running my snort logs, and I issued the machine learning log reduce. So it creates a signature tab, as I mentioned before. That signatures tab is going to go through all of those messages and group the patterns that are alike together. So again, if I take a look, here's my messages tab. As I mentioned before, this is the breakdown of the message. If I go to my signatures tab, it says of those 6,184 messages, this phrase appeared 3,000 of those times. Now, when you see the asterisk, that means the values change. Maybe the IP changed, or maybe the value, the numeric value, whatever, the number is different. Okay, but again, you're seeing the breakdown here. It says, hey, this value is 1,000 times plus, and so forth and so on. Now, in the log reduce, there's some other features available for you as well. For example, I could look at this message. Let's say that you all, I report to all of you, okay? And what I have to do is I have to classify these messages as high priority or low priority, okay? And you would review them. So let's imagine that. So if I looked at this message and I said, oh, okay, cancellation of template. Oh, maybe we did a installation and it has a leak. So maybe we know about that. So what I could do here, you see these thumbs up, down, the promote and demote, I could demote this item. And what that does, it changes the relevancy to 0, okay? And the reason it does that is because I deemed it as demoted relevancy, okay? Now, if I decided that this item should be promoted and you should look at it, I could promote it. Notice the relevancy now changes to a higher number, okay? So again, that up, down will allow you to change the relevancy. That's what it's doing for you, okay? Now, over to the right, there is the edit. The edit will allow you to edit it. You cannot delete it, but you can edit it, all right? Then you could also always click on the actual number here, the count number. That will focus only on those items. So here's all 3,000 of those items that I'm focusing on. Other techniques that you could do within this lab is you could look at messages that are before. So for example, I'm going to the host and I'm looking for the surrounding messages. Maybe I want to find out, well, what happened before this message? Or what happens after, okay? I can look at it from a host name, from a host, from a name, or from a category. I can find out the surrounding messages, okay? All right, very good. Let's go back to that snort where we had the log reduce, and let's delete everything under the source category. So we want it to be blank right now. All right, so the next part of our example, we're going to our lab number 9, and we're just going to use our snort logs. We're going to use a log compare, okay, which allows you to compare your log activity from 2 different time periods, okay, which would provide you insight on how your current time compares to a baseline, okay? In this case, we're going to use a log compare to identify when our signature messages deviated by more than 25% of the baseline. So let's go ahead and grab what's, well, we don't need to do that. Let's go ahead and go back to our actual CIP. And again, we're doing this for 60 minutes, okay? Let's go ahead and run it for 60 minutes so we can get that log compare and the log reduce. So we want those 2 items. So I ran it again, the snort logs, okay? Now, when we click on the log compare, by default, it's going to use a time shift operator and give you the last, or give you 24 hours ago. So we're running this for the last 60 minutes for a time shift period of 24 hours ago. This time shift and log compare, it automatically populated when I clicked on the log compare, as well as the -24. I could change it. Maybe I don't want the last 24 hours. Maybe I want the last 10 hours or the last 3 hours or what have you. I can manually change this value right here if I wanted to, okay? Now let's take a look at what we're seeing. We're seeing that this message and the bottom percentage, there's a 51% different change from this time yesterday. There's a 4.4% change, a 5 point, and so forth. So that bottom number is showing you the percent change from yesterday. Go ahead, you can type your question in the chat, Andrew, go ahead. All right, so that bottom number is the change from the prior period, okay? Make sure here. Oh, okay, no worries, no worries, no worries. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the log shift. Now, as I mentioned, you could manually change this value to a different time period, or the log compare has a drop-down arrow there to the right of it for you. You could choose a time period or create a custom time period if you want it to time shift, okay? Let's go ahead, do that. Now, we now want to view our results where the delta percentage is greater than 25%. We're going to add a where clause. So under number 3, which actually should be number 2, under number 3, let's go ahead and copy the last line of code. That's all we need, is the last line of code under number 3. And let's go back and let's add a new line and let's paste. And let's talk about what we're doing. We're using a where clause and we're using an absolute operator. We're saying where the absolute delta percentage is greater than 25%. So it's going to go through and look at these percentages and bring back what's greater than 25%. Whether it be negative or positive, greater than 25%, that's what the absolute does for you. So if we look at our signatures tab and our results, right, we can see that I have these three or these two items that have a percentage greater than 25. Okay. And let's go ahead and do number 4. Number 4, we're just going to highlight the last row of code. Just highlight that last row. So we're going to get the is new. Okay. Pardon me. Let's go back to our, and let's highlight the last line of code and replace with what we copied. All right, and let's run that. And if there's anything that's new, and is new is meaning if there was a difference between today and yesterday, if there were new values, it would bring the new values up here for us. All righty. And it didn't get any results, but again, if I keep running this for a longer period of time, I probably would get, let's do 3 days. I probably would get some results here where the is new, where it's a difference between those time periods. Looks like it might give us something. All right, so here it is. Now, we didn't see new in our other examples, but basically what new means is 24 hours ago, it didn't exist. So it's new to us. So that's why we're using this is new. It's showing us what's new, what didn't exist. Okay, and that's all part of that log compare, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's pick up. We got to continue. We got a couple more and we can get through this here. All right, let's go ahead and do lab 10. We want to identify out of the ordinary events. We're going to look at our outliers. And let me go ahead and show you about the outliers. This is our standard deviation. Okay, and with our outliers, there's 4 fields that I want to kind of point out to you. There's the window, which sets the trailing number. So it gives you the mean and the standard deviation. There's the threshold, which sets the total number of standard deviations. There's the consecutive, which sets the number of consecutive indicator data points to trigger a violation. And then there's the direction, which shows you outside of, above or below the range. Okay, so that's part of the outlier. You can look at this and read it more in depth by searching for your actual outliers. All right, let's go ahead and highlight what's under number 4 there. Make sure you get everything under number 4. We're going to run this query for the last 60 minutes. We're searching for our status codes of 404s, and we want to identify outliers outside of 3 standard deviations. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new log search, a new log search, please. Sorry about that. And let's paste. All right, let's talk about what we have. So we're going to get our source category access. We're bringing back all of our status codes of 404. And we're doing this for the last 60 minutes. We're then going to render our results in 1 minute time slices. So you can see through here, all of these messages are 404. I have 998 of them. Okay. I am going to render my results in 1 minute buckets. So that's why I'm using the time slice operator. I'm going to create an aggregates tab. We're going to count by status code and call it error count. So we have a new tab here called aggregates, and we're counting our errors on a minute by minute basis. Okay. Then we're using an outlier for our error counts. We're setting our 1 to the 10. That's going to calculate the standard deviation and the mean. We want, I'm going to change this to 2 so I can demonstrate consecutive for you. And I'm going to drop down my threshold a bit to give me more messages. Okay, so I'm just using a 1.1 here. And then I'll run that. Now we're going to take a look at these results on the aggregates tab. So let's take a look. For example, on my screen, I see the error count. Okay, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So I see, for example, this first error here, the error count is 31. My upper count is 21. My lower count is 11. So this 31 is outside the boundaries. So I have an error count indicator and an error count violation. Okay. Here's another example. Okay. I have an error count of 6. It's outside the boundary of 24 and 15. So I have an error count indicator and I have a violation. I also have an error count here as well as another violation. Okay. Now the numbers are great, but displaying them is probably even better. Visualizations, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to go ahead and click on our line chart. And now we can see, again, any of the outliers. Now, this direction here, if I change it to plus only, because right now I'm saying above and below, if I change it plus, it's going to show me everything above the actual range. So everything outside the range is going to show me the plus. If I use the minus, see everything above. If I use the minus, it's going to show me everything below. Okay. All right. Couple more labs. You're almost done. I know I'm going a little long-winded, but hang in there. Let's go ahead and go to lab number 11. Lab number 11 is where we are. We're going to use the predict operator. Okay. We want to be able to predict and find out if, and use some of the tools intelligence to find out, hey, do you think I'm going to have these items? There's 2 types of predicts that are available. Okay. We're going to use the linear regression model. There's also an auto regression model. Again, you can come out here and search for predict on your own and find out more information about it. Okay. Let's go back here. So again, we want to predict the future. We want to search our logs for 404s for the last 60 minutes. We're going to use 1 minute time slices. We're going to predict the future. Okay, so let's highlight what's under here. Number 3, and let's create a new log search for the last 60 minutes. All right, so again, the first one you're familiar with already. You know, we're going to use a 404s as our keyword. We're rendering in 1 minute buckets. We're going to count. So I'm going to do all of that except the last statement. And we're doing this for the last 60 minutes. So I'll run it. Again, that count is going to give us an aggregates tab. We can see our errors on minute slices. The minutes are not in any order, so be aware of that. Once I run that predict, it's going to predict the error count by 1 minute slices as well. And what you're going to see here is the error and the prediction. Okay. And then we can actually display that in a line chart as well. And we can see that this is trending down. So I can see that it looks like that my errors are going to be decreasing in the future. Okay. Again, what we did was we did the actual prediction. We saw the values. It is better to see it in a line chart, and we see that that line is going, mine is going in a downward example. Okay. All right, let's get to lab number 12, analyzing log messages. All right, so this is using the transaction operator. And this would be great if you were doing inventory or you had some type of inventory that you have to keep track of no matter what it is, okay? Transaction operator provides insight into correlated events, helping you identify issues or visualizing data flow, okay? So let's go ahead and copy everything under number 3, and we're gonna run that for the last 24 hours. New log search, paste, and last 24 hours. And let me just kind of walk through it just briefly here to kind of give you a high level. So we're going against our ecommark logs. We're bringing those back. We're parsing and looking for IP addresses. We're not going to drop it if it doesn't find the actual format. We're then going to use the transaction on the IP. And these are the different stages: confirmation, shipping, billing, etc. Okay, and we're going to run that. So we're running this for the last 24 hours. We can see the from state, the to state. If we look at our original messages tab, we can see whether it was overshipped, what status is in, the confirmation, etc. That's all on our aggregates tab. On our messages tab. If we go to our aggregates, we see it has some values here. But using the actual transaction operator also allows us to use our sandwich, our diagram here. So we're going to use our flow diagram. It's 2 icons to the left there. So here I can look at the red in my shipping, and I can see that, again, what I have in my cart, what's inbound, what's outbound. And a good example that a good analogy I like using for this is, let's imagine that my wife and I went to the grocery store, and I'm pushing the cart, and I see something and I put it in the cart. And I turn around and get something else, and she takes what I put in the cart out of the cart. I put something in the cart, she takes it out. And that type of scenario. So you can get that type of information from this type of example, okay? And let's get to the actual last lab here, ladies and gentlemen, lab number 13, creating meaningful alerts. Last lab here. I am going to share with you a blog post, which is going to be a great read for you when it comes to identifying meaningful alerts. So you don't want to get alerted on everything. It's a good idea to know what's a meaningful alert. So I'll go ahead and share that with you in the chat. And you can have that at your leisure, okay? Let's go ahead and copy under number 5. So we want to identify an outlier, and that outlier is going to force us to go ahead and build an alert. So let's go ahead and copy this, and let's run it. Let's run it for the last 24 hours. Okay. Back here in the CIP, a new log search, and we're running it for the last 24 hours. All right, so let's find out what it's doing. Again, I'm reminding you, you guys kind of know all of this stuff. So access messages, I want my status codes to be either 200 or 400, only bring back those. I want to render in 1-minute time slices. I want to create a new column called successes. I'm going to have a 1 or 0 in it based on if the status code is 200. I'll have another new column called fails. It's going to have a 1 or 0 in it if it's the if statement is a 404. Okay. Then we're summing all of the successes and summing all of the fails. Okay, let me get up to that point for the last 24 hours. So again, we have those 2 columns, success count and fail count. We have an aggregates tab because we have a sum aggregate. The next line of code is going to divide the fail count by the success count added to the fail count multiplied by 100. It's going to give us a percentage. So we want our failure rate percentage. And then finally, we want to identify outliers based on that failure rate percentage. So again, we're using the failure rate percentage, we're designating what we want, and we're going to go ahead and run that. Okay, and then we'll look at our failure rate percentage again, and we can see that there are some indicators here where we have some failure rates. Okay, the last thing we want to do in this code, adding this line, the where clause, allows us to filter out only outliers where the ratio is higher than normal. We can now create a scheduled search to alert on this query. So again, we're going to add this last line of code where we want the failure rate percentage to be greater than 0. Okay. So we want our failure rate percentage to be greater than 0. So let's add another line of code, Shift Enter, paste, and let's run it. It's going to only identify where the failure rate is greater than 0. Those would be where we want to set up an alert. So these are the indications of the alerts. How do we set up an alert? This is a reminder. You guys should remember this already. You go to your search, up to your log search. You can either click on the Save As icon, or you can click on the 3 dots and choose Save As. You then go down to schedule this search. You change the frequency from never to whatever time period you want. I'll just use 15 minutes. Okay. And we want to set up the alert. So we can email them through alert. We can set up webhooks so we can get Slack alerts. We can do some script actions. Again, you have multiple choices out here for alerting. Okay. And then you would save it. Of course, you can also add the CSV as well. You can add any recipients that you need as well. Okay. And lastly, I want to show you how to turn off this once you save it. Okay. So it's saved now. I want to turn it off because it's going to run. I'll go back to the actual query. And I will go to the edit this schedule, and as long as you put it in never, it should not, it will not, it won't run. Never and update, or you could always delete it. All right, awesome. So any questions? All right, if there aren't any questions, it's time for you to go ahead and take your exam. So let me demonstrate how you're going to take the exam. For those of you that were with me yesterday, it's the same method. First thing you're going to do is you're going to log out of our training environment. We don't want your certificate to read training analyst, whatever number you are. So log out of our training environment. And then log into your company's Sumo environment. Just as I'm doing. Once you log into your company's Sumo environment, you're then going to click on the certification link under the Home tab. Certification link under the Home tab. Click on Get Certified. This opens up our skill jar app. And then you're going to go ahead and choose Get Certified again. The courses are in different languages. The exams are different languages. You, of course, want the Search Mastery exam. The Search Mastery. It's a quick registration, free, real quick. Go through the exam. Make sure you click Finish or End or Submit Results. And again, it's open book, open slides, open internet. I will be here for an hour to assist you as well. All righty. So on behalf of myself and Josh, I'd like to thank you all for allowing us to present to you. Hopefully you learned a lot. There's a lot of information. You're right, Brad. There's a lot of information. If you're taking the exam, please go ahead and take the exam. I'll be here for an hour to assist you. I will put up the link for your Uber Eats voucher. for those of you that are joining me tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in our administration course. Again, once you're finished with the actual exam, you can close out of the session. Okay. All of you are welcome and good luck on the test.